Welcome to the Schmooze, Calgary's weekly community podcast where we bring together the voices, events, and stories shaping Jewish life in our city. I'm Don Shapiro with Jared Shore. Pull up a chair, let's schmooze. Jared, we just spent an hour with Shuv in the special edition of the Schmooze. We didn't. It's not a typical interview where we get to know about his background and his interests, his likes, and what led him into politics that we like to do. This was more in reaction to the Bondi Beach massacre in Australia and about Jewish safety in Canada as it stands today. And Shuv has certainly been a light for the community since he's been voted in. Hey?
Yeah, uh, look, our community is very familiar with Shuv. He is well known as it represents I would say most of Calgary's Jewish community as member of parliament. Shuv gives us a great perspective on the national landscape, but also, knows Calgary and knows the concerns, the fears, the pride, the celebrations. Like he knows our community extremely well. So he's got his finger on the pulse, and frankly, a great time to have such a steadfast ally sharing thoughts at a celebratory time and a very challenging time.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard about Shiv, shortly after he got elected, and nothing, just another conservative MP voted in Harper's old riding, right? So there wasn't anything that really stood out until October 9th. And October 9th, when we had the his famous, or to me, something that inspired me, his speech where he stood up in a room filled with mourners and other politicians. And what he said was different. I'm not a friend to the Jews. I'm not an ally. I'm a Zionist. And it was after that I went up to him and I said, "There's one part of your speech that I didn't like, and you said that Jews are have a right to defend themselves, and it's we have a responsibility." And he said, "Can I take those words to Parliament?" And I said, "Sure," and he did, and it was, other politicians since then who spoke on that event on October 9th have fallen by the wayside, and he has not. Unequivocally, he has stood beside the community because I think of the shared belief that Jewish values in Canada are Canadian values, and he's doing it from a Canadian perspective, not from as a Canadian patriot, not as a Zionist with foreign interests. And I think that that's the inspiring thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, Shuv has an incredibly interesting personal story that has led him to be who he is. By his own admission, he's a relatively new parliamentarian. I mean, two and a half years. But that being said, he has done. I mean, he's worked in politics for decades, and is so well versed in geopolitics. Knows Israel like the back of his hand, knows the UAE like the back of his hand, understands China. He is an incredible wealth of knowledge, and his concern, as you mentioned, is Canada. And because we are such an integral part of Canada's identity, even when our politicians aren't sure what Canadian identity is, our current government, um, the opposition does. The opposition knows what Canadian identity means, and Tube's there to stand with us and protect it.
And I think that in our the 1 hour we had the opportunity to sit with Shiv and otherwise very busy schedule, and again, we're very thankful. There were moments that I felt fear, right? Especially when you asked about the qualitative difference between Canada and Australia. But there were also many moments of inspiration and support and clarity for what the future um, could look like if we activate. And so again, I want to thank everybody for listening, and for our special episode today with our MP, Shuv. When crisis strikes, help doesn't arrive eventually, it arrives immediately. Magen David Adom is Israel's national emergency medical service, and every day their paramedics and volunteers are saving lives, responding to terror attacks, accidents, medical emergencies, and disasters. From the front lines to the ambulance, from the call to the hospital, they are there when seconds matter. Your donation through Magen David Adom Calgary directly supports life-saving equipment, training, and emergency response. Please give what you can today, because when life is on the line, every second counts. Um, I want to thank everybody for listening in today. This is a special episode of the Schmooze podcast. We are very grateful to have with us Shuv Majumdar, our MP here in Calgary. And we wanted, and one of the reasons we're so grateful, and we wanted to do the special episode was we are still in Hanukkah. We are only 4 or 5 days removed from a massacre in Australia, Bondi Beach, that ended up in the deaths of Jews, not you know Zionists, not anything else, just Jews celebrating Hanukkah on a beach where there was party favors and donuts and a celebration. We were targeted just for being Jewish, and that raises questions not only in our community here in Calgary but across Canada of what really is our safety. Um, you know, in this holiday and just being able to walk around, and what is the responsibility that the governments across Canada have to us, and what can we rely on because our faith is starting to waver. So speaking to you, Shiv, today is a real honor, and I know the community is really looking for that voice. And we'll get into more detail about some of the other voices and some of the other things that have been said, but now we're looking for something to be done. So Shiv, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So in the spirit of tonight is going to be the fifth night of Hanukkah, and I'm still lighting my menorah on my big bay window so you could see it as we're supposed to do. But there is a feeling of if a car is driving by, is he driving by too slow? That fear that we have in our house and across the community, I mean, it's palpable and it's real. What responsibility and why, I guess, what can you speak to regarding what happened in Australia and why you feel maybe this can or cannot happen to us here in Calgary?
Yeah, sure, Don. I mean, look at the every single time you think that maybe we've moved past the madness, that there might be a chance to genuinely celebrate the miracle of Hanukkah thousands of years after the actual event, that maybe even after these horrific 2 years that the Jewish communities around the world, the Jewish world itself, has been traumatized so deeply with this epidemic of anti-Semitism that has been an explosion across Western democracy, the land of Israel and the state of Israel under attack by its enemies in a seven-front war that maybe we might be able to enter after the Gaza conflict has kind of, in a sense, come to an end and the hostages have come home. Maybe we were able to celebrate this season with the way that we could with our children, our family, our friends, our loved ones, Jews and non-Jews alike, together in actual love with each other. This attack just stole that, and it in Bondi, Sydney, reminded the world that this lurking anti-Semitism, this violent tyranny, continues in the Western world and across the world. And the massacre of so many innocent people, the near massacre of hundreds more, were it not for the bravery of those who intervened, heroes that they are, really shakes that sense of security, that sense of stability to our core. And it makes us ask the question, like, why does this continue to persist? Why do we still have this scourge? How is the world not yet woken up to the threat, the imminent threat that this evil presents not just to Jewish life, but to Western civilization itself? How could there be still people who accommodate this or appease it or tolerate it and betray our core values? Um, in that, I think a legion of Canadians, millions of Canadians, stand with their Jewish brothers and sisters and to say to them, you are not alone. This is not tolerable. We know that this prison, this world seems broken, that there is an inversion of truth. And there's a great fight to restore that truth and to restore that trust, and especially for our Jewish world to restore that sense of safety. And I mean, in that, what do we respond with? Well, Hanukkah provides exactly the blueprint for what we need to do. Because when you think of Antiochus and the kind of threat that the God King posed to the Jewish temple, to the Jewish people, to eradicate the Jewish faith, um, and how vastly outnumber the Maccabees and those Jews of those day of that day were, and the fight that they had fought for their own existence, the right for Jews to practice their faith and tell their story, and to preserve their heritage, then we have no choice except to turn to that blueprint and realize that no matter how hard it gets, how dark the tyranny is, how difficult it might seem, even the tiniest light, even the tiniest light, once the fight is won, is can punch through the heaviest of darkness. And it's a powerful lesson. Hard as it is to celebrate in the aftermath of Bondi, it is a powerful lesson to recenter all of us with the miracle of the light, the miracle of Hanukkah. And so to you and to everybody, Hag Hanukkah Sameach. I know it might be difficult, but certainly we have a lot to celebrate.
Shuv, you as a member of parliament and someone who spends a lot of time with their constituents on the ground, you have two very interesting perspectives. From your point of view, is the situation in Canada qualitatively different from the situation in Australia?
No, I think that what we what we are seeing across the Western world is a real vulnerability. The Australian government, the British government, the French government, and even the Canadian government have proven to fail at understanding exactly what's on the line. Too often they turn to appease um, terrorism in the name of tolerance, of moral equivalency, when what is required is moral clarity. And I think in much of the Western world, we have these really false assumptions of what we are up against and what we must do to really secure our communities from that. And so while I have yet to, nobody in Canada would ever want to see this attack on Jewish life. We're all very scared that something like that might happen. Very concerned that we haven't gotten it together the way that we should be across various levels of government, of policy. We know law enforcement are great across the country, in communities in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary. Law enforcement want to do the job, but politics holds them back from preventing the harassment, the intimidation, the incitement of hatred, the attacks on Jewish life, whether it's a school or a synagogue. Like these are actual crimes that need to be prosecuted, in addition to the hateful nature of them. And we've seen a disproportionate application of that law, particularly in defense of our Jewish communities. So no is the answer that I present. I worry that we're still too slow in getting it right.
I'm conscious of a couple of things that, everybody talks about this rise in anti-Semitism. 27 years ago, when I was at Chabad, when it was in Woodbine, there were security cameras outside and inside and a magnetic lock on the door. I went to the Anne Frank house. My dad took me for my bar mitzvah, 13. When I went back about 25 years later, metal guardrails because it was attacked and it was, people tried to burn the building down. This is well before, any anti-Zionist excuses that are out there. And so now we're hearing leaders, some of them might change their tone. Albanese in Australia says that there's a new sort of radicalization thing that they're working on. It's without any substance whatsoever. In Canada, we have the prime minister out there saying, we stand against anti-Semitism, and we see in Toronto, the police said, if you see anything that could cause alarm, let us know. Well, they're still allowing these roving gangs of what's equivalent to the KKK going through black neighborhoods, these terrorist supporting protesters walking through Jewish neighborhoods. And you think the rhetoric would go down. And I know, Jared, you have something about this. The CBC has just not done that. And the government of Canada hasn't. There was a 30-member delegation that our foreign minister just put out a tweet about how Israel was behaving in a way while their whole delegation was sponsored by a terrorist organization. That's not told to us. You think the rhetoric would go down, but it's not. And this is short days after what happened at Bondi Beach. Like, when will these lessons be learned?
Like Liberal Minister Anita Anand is not exactly your example of competency when it comes to any of these issues. I mean, she's completely on this issue, especially, been completely unmoored. I mean, we could see it in the genesis of the election campaign where she would make these outright lies about what was going on in the war from Gaza. We saw the kind of enthusiasm that she brought when Prime Minister Carney broke trust with the rule of law and human dignity and recognized the state, rewarding terrorists with an actual state, and her standing up in the United Nations like a trained seal, clapping away, dispense with any reason. This minister and her defense of like the insensitivity of doing it after Bondi, especially like days after Bondi, the insensitivity that she brings to the amazing efforts that the state of Israel does to safeguard democracy, to safeguard human dignity, to safeguard the rights of all, including in a horrific competition in one of the most dense urban environments of warfare ever known in history, to just dispense with it the way she does and put her politics ahead of her country, and to put her party ahead of our national interests by siding with these propagandists just tells you everything about what kind of person she is and what kind of minister she is and what kind of government she represents. I think it's an abomination. I find her to be on this absolutely shameless. And it's one of the reasons why we in the opposition work so hard to debate that perspective, to argue with it, and ultimately to replace it.
Shuv, you talked about political will, and I mean, it seemed more than obvious to Jewish Canadians that there is no political will to address this, and certainly, uh, our hope was that those that were massacred in Australia would not die in vain. I'm not sure we're going to see that as we're talking about the insensitivity of our foreign minister, who's really a reflection of the prime minister and his perspective. But let's talk about Calgary for a moment. Uh, we hear ad nauseum, the laws are there, they're not being enforced. So where are the push points? Where is the holdup? What are you doing as a concerned member of the opposition? And frankly, where do we need to lean as a Jewish community?
Oh, I appreciate that. It's a great question, Jared, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And in many ways, I actually want to call out Calgary for being successful. I know that there are always vulnerabilities, and I don't want to deny that and create a false sense of security when work needs to be done. But here is a province where on our major campuses, we've resisted perpetual encampments. We've had troublemakers, but we've resisted perpetual encampments by university administrators acting decisively with law enforcement. We have protests because we value free speech. but the protests are well contained, well managed by law enforcement, well zoned in a way that might offend, but certainly it'll be hard to point at a systemic intimidation of Jewish communities being successful, despite the intention. We have a premier and her cabinet, Danielle Smith, who have been strong and resolute on this issue from day one, and telling people if they feel that the law enforcement is somehow acting inappropriately, there are places for recourse to pursue that in a process by which accountability can be measured. And that's exactly how the system is supposed to work. And on Monday night at our own Hanukkah lighting, our memorial, uh,
Our City Hall celebration. Yeah.
celebration. Thank you. Menorah. Uh,
Yeah.
our mayor, Jeremy Farkas, speaking clearly, unequivocally about what it is to be Calgarian and what it means to be proud of faith in Calgary and how Jews in Calgary are encouraged and accepted and celebrated and encouraged to celebrate their faith freely and safely. As a legislator, I get to work at all levels of government. I've been working with my counterparts provincially, as well as newly municipally. You know, we had municipal elections recently. And Mayor Farkas and I have had a long conversation about how to really deal with the radicalization that occurs in countries and cities that are transforming so quickly. And so when he described the de-radicalization efforts that he intends to undertake, I know that the intention is to be concrete, to be real, and to be focused on saving the very idea of Calgary itself, which is a welcoming, wonderful city for all, and a dynamic municipality that belongs alongside the greatest cities in the world. So I think that we in Alberta have a lot to be proud of, Jared. And I think one of the things is to take that light and take these lessons, take these examples as they are successful and scale them for others to learn from our example, and always continue to improve in areas where there's opportunity to build. So I think we've got a lot to be very proud of here in Calgary, including the two of you for creating the Schmooze podcast, where we have an opportunity to tell these stories. So thank you.
I'm glad you did that, and I just want to hop in for a quick follow-up because I'm glad you mentioned that Calgary and the province actually seem to be the exemplar. I don't want to convey a feeling that we're in the same kind of situation as Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. I think it's qualitatively different. I think you pointed out many of the successes and probably why Alberta Jews, and I would say Calgary Jews, feel qualitatively different than the rest of the country, though we're watching, the proverbial walls close in. You mentioned Mayor Farkas, and Mayor Farkas's speech has been one of the most shared speeches that we have seen from a politician. And granted, we've seen some wonderful ones from you, from your leader, but that speech from Mayor Farkas stood out to people. Why? Why did it resonate so much, do you think? What were some of the points that you think really hit home?
I think he showed leadership in a time in which the city needed it, you know, in the aftermath of seeing, flag raisings across the country that were not designed to celebrate the ideal of a Palestinian state, but rather the worst elements of those subverting a Palestinian state. We saw the mayor deliver a speech of moral clarity, and whether it's Pierre Poilievre, Melissa Lantsman, myself, or others who have been arguing and litigating this over the last 2 years, it's good to welcome allyship like Jeremy Farkas's new leaders who speak clearly and boldly, to encourage them to speak to the world beyond the Jewish world about why it's so important that we get this right, to draw those first principles clearly and plainly, in ways that anybody can understand the difference between an extremist that's trying to kill people versus the safety of a people who are trying to live freely. So it's actually, he gave a great speech, and I think it speaks to his own background. For those of us who've known him a long time, he's not new to these issues. He's spent a lot of time with the community, learning about the country, the state of Israel, and as a mayor, I expect he's going to bring obsession to making sure Calgary is the greatest city in the country. And part of that includes being an example for others to follow when it comes to dealing with these types of ongoing threats.
It was very, very encouraging to see. And there's always that underlying hope that an event like Bondi could possibly lead to a turning point. And then listening to Mayor Farkas is, will other communities, cities, municipalities throughout the country start showing that same leadership? And then, of course, Olivia Chow in Toronto puts her foot in her mouth, and then in one interview, and then the police chief has to come out the next day and correct her. And so it seems to not happen. But from our perspective, as being this community in Calgary that has seemed to create the good relationships, not only with its all levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal, do we expand our reach out? Now, the reason I ask is I was just in Winnipeg this past weekend, and I went to the Human Rights Museum. And while I was at the Holocaust exhibit aspect, I asked to speak to a manager to talk about this upcoming Nakba exhibit that they're coming up in June. And I framed the conversation as, it's interesting that we're standing in the Holocaust exhibit where you actually have displays where governments used credible institutions in order to propagandize the dehumanization of Jews. How is that different than what you're doing with this Nakba exhibit, which Nakba is a contentious, nuanced topic, much more than what's been accepted through, to quote God Sad, this suicidal empathy that we seem to have. So, I've taken this, or I've made the decision for myself. I'm going to fight that exhibit at the Human Rights Museum until the day it opens and even afterwards, because it's just not right in the spirit of that. And Jared, I know that you're gonna the follow up you have around the CBC's fascination with us. What can we do not only for our own community here in Calgary, but to help other communities, stand up and not be as afraid? Because I still feel fear,
Yeah.
but action in the face of fear is the only thing that helps.
It's a really powerful question. I mean, the definition of genocide and the abuse of the word genocide is something that bothers me deeply. I'm the vice chair of the Subcommittee for International Human Rights in the Parliament of Canada. I've spent a career looking at the interests of Canada, our security, our prosperity, and our values. Almost 25 years in this world looking at these types of issues. I come from a family that had to deal with persecution in a country like Bangladesh, where in Greater India before partition, part of my family roots are from, and the draining of Hindus in those parts of the world by tyrannical forces that saw millions displaced. Uh, the word genocide itself was a word that was established in law and in moral, with a sense of morality. It was Humphreys, a New Brunswick Canadian, who at McGill defined the word and it legally created a basis for humanity to understand what the worst among us could be. And it is about the systemic destruction of an entire people, the eradication of a language, a religion, an ethnicity. It is systemic in the sense that every aspect of a society is working to eliminate that, to purge it. It was a difficult and ecumenical examination of what had happened in the Holocaust to the Jews. Holocaust education is not entirely about understanding what happened to the Jews, but to be able to understand what definitions and words like genocide have so that they have meaning and that they can be applied and used responsibly. What this exhibit that you've described being proposed for the museum in Winnipeg is is a part of a systemic destruction of truth. Um, and we have seen this systemic destruction of truth, of history, of fact, uh, being waged across our campuses, our academy, our businesses, our bureaucracy, our law enforcement, our prosecutors' offices. We see it spilled into our media and the editorial perspectives they present as news, propaganda outright as news. We are seeing a systemic assault on the truth, if you would, a genocide of truth. And when places of learning like this museum or public libraries fall into these moral equivalencies and have failed to courageously tell the truth, there's something deeper that is at stake, more on the line. And it is a fight that I think is probably one of the most important fights that we have to prevail for over in the Western world, especially as we enter a digital age where the truth and reality is replaced by fake things and virtual reality. Um, and it is something that concerns me very deeply because at the end of the day, if we cannot hold on to the very concept of what is true, what is right, what is fact, then everything we stand for no longer exists. And we fall into a world in which is best defined as postmodern or post-national, of equivalencies that are, as you described earlier, built upon suicidal empathy, and empathy that ultimately will result in the destruction of everything that we've ever stood for.
Shuv, you mentioned the media, and certainly we've got many concerns about how the media is, seems to have decided, save for the National Post and a few other outlets, largely the media has bought and is selling the facile notion of oppressed, oppressor narratives, and Israel and Jews, for that matter, are the oppressors. First of all, is anybody watching the CBC? And second of all, what are they contributing to the toxicity that we are experiencing in this country?
No, it's horrific. The one is that, and people have their habits. For 30 years, they've had these mainstream news outlets kind of on in the background as they're preparing their dinners, or kids are coming back from school, or you're living your life. I mean, I choose to put Food Network on because I just think it's more relaxing to watch. But here, people decide to keep the CBC, and you can see these legacy media outlets over time understand the power they have. And then the producers walk in with their indoctrinated perspectives, particularly in the last decade or so, feeling that it's not their responsibility to just report facts anymore, but it's also their responsibility to provide, quote, context to those facts. They must educate the masses about the facts. And only they, the high arbiters, brought down from the ivory towers, their learned ways, are the ones that can really give the perspective, the lens, the prism by which the news and the facts ought to be interpreted. What arrogance, what absolute nonsense to say that they know best and people know least. I have the exact opposite perspective. I'm a conservative. I believe in the common sense of the common people. I believe that facts and what we should think about those facts are best discerned by big debate, peaceful debate, robust and peaceful debate, that we interrogate these facts until we learn truth and make decisions on the basis of those things. The CBC and all these other mainstream outlets do none of that. They only present different vessels for the same perspective. It's part of an ideology that we have seen emerge in Canada, particularly from the academy, that has trained people into thinking that, well, listen, if you are a person of color, then you should have one perspective. And anybody who does not share that perspective has no right to claim that they are part of that community or that ethnicity or that person of color. Like, it's this concept of multiculturalism, which has now been manipulated from what was once a celebration of our ethnic and religious diversity into conformity of people into different groups. The same concept has bled into areas that deny women the identity of being women, their safety, their sports, their achievement, their accomplishment, their privacy. and denying men their right to be men, to be fearless, to have a sense of responsibility, you've got a generation of young men who have been told that they are the problem, even though they did nothing, that they're going to be held accountable for the sins of their forefathers. And then you come into the international context of multilateralism, this idea, which was about international cooperation, a perfectly justifiable idea. One I think everybody wants to see is that countries who can cooperate on the basis of shared values is a good thing. But that has instead been replaced with the celebration of the United Nations, a convention center, a meeting room surrounded by nice restaurants and nice hotels. And okay, well, that's great, but the United Nations is really about the nations that are interacting with each other, nations defined by laws, by borders, by values. Um, the reason I'm saying this about this when you talk about the media in the country is that we're in this world where the mainstream press and the institutions of the country, whether it's academic press or others, have all been purveyors of this indoctrination, this ideology. And if at any minute you stand outside of that ideology or raise a thoughtful question, then they will not platform you, they will cancel you, and they will continue to spread the propaganda as they have continued to in the case of the state of Israel and the Jewish world.
Seeing the indoctrination coming from the universities, I was at this one event in mid-November at MRU. That was a complete indoctrination session. There's calls to violence. They even had their token as a Jew that had really nothing to add, just to be present, wearing their keffiyeh, like this is what the good Jew should look like, sort of thing. It was an
They're not
embarrassing.
even debate, right?
Well, it was all under the guise of academic freedom. So they actually closed the debate. They actually said the academia has decided that this is, it was a ridiculous event, and MRU has not walked back on it as of yet, or done any sanctions. That being said, where the CBC is, we know where universities are at. And there's a graphic we're going to share that Jared shared earlier about the CBC's absolute fascination with creating anti-Israel narratives. Now we're at a point where there are hate speech laws that we have on the books that aren't being followed. Yet the CBC, and if you listen to radio, the conservatives are against this wonderful new idea for a bill, and it just doesn't, a lot of things don't seem to fit, and it's causing me an anxiety about Bill C9, that if we're not following the law, like the laws that we currently have, why are we creating new laws? And what does that mean for our ability of free speech to be able to talk about these things in an open way, using fact where ideology isn't present, and we're talking about the actual human lives that are at risk by some of these ideologies. Can you speak to C9 and
Yeah.
what the problems are with that?
100%. I mean, look, C9, the intentions are pure in a sense, and they called it pure. It's confronting hate crimes. It's like, okay, so you won't make the decisions. You feel like you need a piece of legislation for the cover to, go after somebody who is inciting people to hatred, who is shooting religious sites or burning churches to the ground or committing these obviously violent acts that are already part of the criminal code. Maybe there's a chance to refurbish it a bit. Maybe we should be very open-minded about saying, okay, if a listed terror organization is a listed terror organization, then let us treat their symbols as symbols of hate. Let's provide that clarity. Fine. Great decision. Let's toughen sentencing on hate crimes. If that's the result of more explicitly talking about hate crimes alongside other crimes that are being committed and it results in tougher sentencing, great. If we can provide the courts clarity, very strong clarity, and the prosecutors of this country, whether they are federal or provincial, the tools they need to go after these criminals, fine. But what this has become instead is a political project by liberals to try and censor spiritual texts. They want to criminalize the Bible. Like there's passages that they feel that, okay, well, that constitutes hate. So therefore, those things are considered hateful. The second thing that they're doing is they're introducing this concept of, quote, identity. I mean, if you want to talk about a human being is a very complex person full of many different types of identities. It's one of the most beautiful things about being a human being is the ability to be many things all at once to your own decisions. It's a subjective world. Like what identities will liberals choose to protect versus what identities will liberals deny? We already see the entire DEI crowd denying Jews from being considered a minority identity. And that brings it into the subjective debate instead of being objective, which is an individual and their rights is objective. That's clear when you're going after one person's rights, one person's safety. It's obvious. You know it when it's happening. So these are all serious problems that liberals are putting into their so-called hate crimes bill in C9 that are more about engineering society to their own delusional ideas of what the country is, rather than the preservation of the safety and the rights of every Canadian. I'm always very concerned about limits to rights. So free speech is a fundamental right. Freedom of religion are fundamental rights for Canadians and aspirationally for people everywhere. So whenever you're imposing limits on rights, which is what this hate crimes bill is about, you're looking to try and find ways to limit what you describe as free speech. I approach it very, very gingerly because I'm a proponent of the right rather than a proponent of the right of the desire to control. And
Right.
so these problems are serious, and I think we in the opposition, we conservatives, are right to be litigating it. My colleagues in the Justice Committee, Andrew Lawton, Roman Baber, are fierce warriors, among others. And as the Parliament trucks along, know that we are not going to surrender our rights to some sort of liberal project that ultimately arms the arsonist to come after the victimized with more strength.
Don, you'd mentioned the CBC obsession that I was showing you guys earlier, and just wanted to point this out. These are the stories that CBC feels worthy of coverage, and on their world category.
Yeah, like
What's
it's not even like you've narrowed it down to the Middle East. This is the whole world. This is what's happening in the entire world. There's one, two, three, four, five, six, and six articles about Israel and why Israel
Mhm.
is evil. This is wonderful. This is wonderful.
And and notably absent is, I mean, Honest Reporting, who I would encourage all of you to follow. Honest Reporting. Honest Reporting, their email today talked about CBC, how quickly CBC produced stories related to Amnesty's condemnation of Israel. Well, Amnesty last week produced the condemnation of Hamas. It was 2 years late, but Amnesty finally came out and condemned Hamas. And a story on the CBC is not to be found. It was deemed unimportant. Uh, there are numerous reports, eyewitness reports, of Hamas stockpiling children's formula in Gaza, withholding it from their own Palestinian children in order to make Israel look bad. There are verified reports as produced and reported in the National Post, other major media outlets. The CBC, in their obsession with Israel, has decided that is unimportant, not important enough to report on. This is maddening, and Shuv, as you can understand from, and I'm sure you can relate, our tax dollars go there. As Canadians, it's incredibly concerning. Now, jumping off the topic of media, because we've talked about it for a little while, um, Canadians are also concerned about the broader security picture, immigration, uh, the fact that there are 450 Hamas-related individuals, Hamas-affiliated individuals in Canada, 1,500 reported members of the IRGC living in Canada. Give us your thoughts about this.
That's a big question. I look, we know that this country has been poorly managed from the start, that they're not even screening refugees on backgrounds anymore as they come across the border. Their own officials are saying this. We are, in the last decade, Justin Trudeau's immigration policy has been so discordant that it has pitted one community against another. It has failed to do the background checks. It's failed to result in a country that's capable of absorbing refugees or immigrants in a way that they can be successful, that they can find a job, go to a home, that our healthcare system wouldn't be overrun. Like, so our population and our economy are inextricably linked, and it has been a fundamental mismanagement of what had been a very successful pan-partisan consensus in this country for a very long time. And in that, now you have this situation where the numbers you describe are staggering and are real, that we have serious national security risks in our country, alive and well, of foreign interference, of intimidation, assassination attempts by foreign governments against Canadians. We have police stations that are operating in ways that seek to control different communities. We have terror organizations snow washing money through our capital markets, our real estate markets, to the tune of billions. Obviously, international crime working with foreign governments constitute a fundamental threat to drug trafficking, human trafficking, gun trafficking issues. It's a dystopian landscape that is an absolute nightmare across different communities in the country where urban densification is now resulting in ethnic ghettos in which people are not integrating successfully. They're not finding the jobs that would allow them to plan for the future. They have no hope that they will be successful in this country and are thus vulnerable to exploitation by crime. I think one of the biggest things that Canada is known for now is that we are the exporter of jacked cars that are stolen off our streets.
Right.
That's a terrible thing to be known for. I'd rather it be known for our oil or gas or uranium or minerals. But hey, the liberal idea is something very different. And I don't mean to be too partisan about it, but I do want to hold them accountable. It's these decisions that they and their incompetent administration have made from Justin Trudeau and now through 7 months of Prime Minister Mark Carney and his new team. They don't have the right to sit back and say, well, we've tried to fix this. It's their government, their people. They know exactly what they need to do. They just refuse to do it. Um, and so, when I think about the national security issues that our country is afflicted by, of threats of cybersecurity and technology, of radicalization and violent extremism, of international crime and foreign interference, of our own economic security, so that we can ensure that the things we produce are landing in markets and trading agreements that actually are successful for our country and our people, and of the defense of our own borders, the northern border from authoritarian aggression, territorial expansion, and our ports that are vulnerable to exploitation by the world's worst actors. You can sense that we need a government capable of making big, bold decisions to bring strength into those decisions, clarity, to really tighten things up and clean up the kind of mess that these liberals have made.
Shuv, I know that we are a little tight for time, and again, I really do very much appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I guess I just want to finish it off with one last comment from you. For myself, whether or not I'm a Zionist or not, which I am, um, my advocacy isn't rooted in some sort of performative pro-Israel advocacy. For the majority of my life, I haven't been involved because I didn't feel I really needed to. Ever since October 7th, I noticed something deeply, deeply concerning within my country. I am doing this not as a Zionist, I am doing this as a Canadian patriot. I have seen Canadian values degrade to the point where I now have to stand up and speak up. And I really learned that lesson from you. I don't see you as a Zionist or pro-Israel or anti this. I see you as a great Canadian. And I think that that's something that we've lost. The Jewish values are Canadian values. And what we're promoting is the promotion of Canada standing beside its liberal democracy, democratic ally, the only one in the Middle East. Where have we lost that? Why do these values are so important to you? And how will you fight to keep promoting them?
Well, thanks for that, Don. I know where our country comes from. I know we have an identity, we have a culture. I know that history we have had as the third oldest democracy on planet Earth is one that is full of scars, and we spend time to learn from those scars to make ourselves even better. That our inheritance is both British and French in the Magna Carta and the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, which is a novel and unique experience in human history. That our aspiration is to bridge newcomer and First Nation in a way that we build a country that is indelibly, irreducibly, indestructibly free. That when we think about the freedom that we enjoy today, that is a derivative of something. It is a derivative of those who waged wars and shed blood, their own and others, in the defense of that idea. An idea that is really born of a sense of Western liberalism, the concept of freedom, of free will. These are inherently Jewish lessons that came through Christianity and then expanded and found expression in so many beautiful ways across the modern Western world. These documents, that laws are the ones that are written by people and not imposed by ruler, they come from something. And it is that reason, that moment of our culture being under attack, dismantled, diluted, whatever you want to call it, that really compelled me to put a name on my ballot just 2.5 years ago. I'm a new legislator in that sense, but I saw what was at risk, just like you did. And this is before October 7th, to our country, to our way of life, and how important it was for us to step forward to fight to defend it. And what happened in October 7th is that that all came under acute focus. Because when you think of the Jewish state, the land of Israel, the indigenous people of the land, and what that story represents, both morally and legally, it is in so many ways at the crux of who we are in the Western world and of what Canada cares about and what our national identity is centered on, and ultimately what our national interests really are.
Don, I have to apologize because last night I gave someone the last question, but today I got to take it.
Please, Jared, it's all yours, man.
Shuv, you were with a gathering of us last night, and it was wonderful to chat with you then and again today. This is a podcast for the Calgary Jewish community, and I don't you have nice things to say about Don, and I appreciate that, but you had something special to say about the Calgary Jewish community, and given this dystopia that we're in. I found it uplifting to hear it from you, so give us your comments about Jewish Calgary.
You are successful. Um, what I mean by that is Jewish Calgary. So many other parts of the country are really struggling, and I get a chance to see this with our friends around the country, whether it's in Toronto or Montreal, Vancouver, elsewhere. I mean, I talk to communities of all backgrounds. I talk to all types of people who have all kinds of priorities. It's part of the job, and I love that. But looking at how our Jewish life in Calgary has approached these existential issues, the creativity that you bring in how you think about our country, our interests, and Jewish life in it, the way in which you engage our city hall, our provincial government, your federal legislators, the confidence that you have, the story that you have to tell. It's a bit unique in the sense that there has been a successful model here in Calgary, especially, that I encourage Jewish life in other parts of the world to take a look at, to learn from, in terms of how they might be able to fight the fight in their own neighborhoods and in their own communities. There's so much creativity and impressive work that goes beyond the Jewish protection of Jewish life and the celebration of Jewish life, but building bridges into other parts of Calgary life in such meaningful and powerful ways. So, Jared, I think that's kind of the thrust of what I had said last night, in the sense that
Mhm.
as much as you say this is a podcast for Calgary Jews, my encouragement to you both is that this be a podcast uh, of Calgary Jewish life as an
Love it.
example.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you. Well said, and I think you have to know that you, among many of our allies, but you do stand out. You buoy us, and you give us that confidence, that shot in the arm when
Brother,
we're
let me
we're
interrupt you.
struggling.
Uh, My job is not like this isn't about me. Like my job is about representing people, all people. I have 110,000 bosses across Southwest Calgary who I admire deeply. They're the best bosses a guy could ever have. And my job is to not make it about me. My job is to be the prism. If there's light that you see in the words I express, it's not me. It's ultimately you, and not just Calgary Jews, but all of the great communities of Southwest Calgary who stand right with you through all of
Mhm.
this. And so the opportunity to be the prism to that light has been an incredible opportunity, an incredible experience. And I'm grateful to you for being that light in this time of incredible darkness. Thank you for that.
I think that the best way to close this off is to say Chag Hanukkah Sameach to everyone, and thank you for helping
I'm
bring in
enjoying
the
some
light.
latkes. I'm becoming a latke.
That's right. A lot of fried foods. Thank you for helping bring in the light, as you always have, Shiv. And
Thanks,
from the
Shiv.
Schmooze.
Dov, toda. Be well, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Before we say goodbye, we want to take a moment to highlight someone you just heard from, Shuv. Shiv's work is grounded in courage, clarity, and a deep commitment to strengthening Jewish life and standing up to anti-Semitism through education and action. If today's conversation resonated with you, we encourage you to visit shuv.ca to learn more about his work, access resources, or support the mission through a donation. That's shuv.ca. Take a moment, get informed, and help make a difference.